Welcome back. You're watching our Business AM. This is your official economic review this morning. All right, let's look at exactly what it is that we have for you here, where remittance inflows to Kenya fell to a 3-month low in February to 260.2 million US dollars, which is equivalent to 28.6 billion shillings. Now, this marks the second consecutive decline in remittance inflows into the country since the start of this year. But according to data from the Central Bank of Kenya, February's remittance inflows were 18.9% higher than remittances in February 2020, which stood at 219 million US dollars, 24 billion shillings equivalent. Now, the cumulative inflows in the 12 months to February 2021 totaled 3.155 billion US dollars, which is equivalent to nearly 347 billion shillings. Now, this denotes an increase of 11.4% compared to 2.831 billion US dollars, or 311.2 billion shillings in the 12 months to February 2020. All right, just before we cross over to the guest that we have for us in the studio today to help us understand why this trend is occurring in 2021, let's cross over and look at that general data on diaspora remittances into the country. And that's exactly what it is that we're talking about, because if you look at from December 2020 to January 2021, there's that decline, and you can actually see exactly the way in which we performed in October and November 2020. But if you look at that numbers in October 2020, November 2020, albeit them being a bit low from what we are normally used to then, if you go back again, then you will see exactly that those numbers were quite healthy in the entire of 2020, even as the world economy was going through the effects of the coronavirus pandemic right now. Good. In the studio, we've had her when we were talking about how the coronavirus pandemic did not really affect the diaspora remittances into the country in the entire of 2020. We are back with her again this morning to talk to us about why we have this trend. We're joined by Rachel Mwakazi. I'm just gonna leave the pronunciation sharp. Good. She is the Project Development Director, Manga Development. No, right. Rachel, how are you doing?
Fine, thank you. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you. Did I get the last pronunciation correct?
Perfect.
Perfect. Thank you very much. All right. Now, the conversation now is that, wow, even as we were going through the entire of 2020, we don't really see a big hit in terms of diaspora remittances or inflows into the country. But as we start 2021, if you look at January, that data was saying that there's a bigger decline from where we were in December up to where we are right now. What could be behind this decline that we're talking about?
Okay, like if you remember in October 2020,
Yes.
World Bank had already predicted that there would be generally a fall of almost 14% by 2021 compared to the pre-COVID levels in 2019.
Yes.
And this is an effect of migration, because some of the factors that are predicted to cause these declines are the weak economic growth and employment levels in migrant hosting countries, as well as weak oil prices and depreciation of the currencies from remittance sources against the US dollar. So those are some of the factors that the World Bank had already named.
Yes.
Yeah, yes, sorry?
Yes, just go right on, Rachel.
Okay, from my side, I would think, if I may speak now for myself as a diasporan or a remitter, yeah, it could also be that last year, in the onset of the pandemic, there was a cry, of course, from families, from friends back home who had lost their jobs, maybe who were struggling to pay rent or such things, and we shared, we increased our remittances so we could cushion our families and probably friends. So of course, a lot of people maybe who are in the same situation that remitted that way, increased their remittances to Kenya, then it caused a rise. But now we are leveling back also here because we have also to take care of our issues also here. And we've also been affected, of course, like anybody else, by the economic crisis at the moment.
Somebody's going to ask you to compare exactly where we were in 2020 and exactly how we started in 2021. Would you say that, well, the other economies now is when they're starting to feel the deeper effects of the coronavirus pandemic as opposed to how they rode it in 2020?
Yeah, for sure. There are some economies now because of prolonged lockdowns and everything. But I think people are getting used to the new normal because a lot of people have become innovative in looking at how they work around these times.
Yes.
So as compared to when the lockdown came and jobs were, some of the people, especially who work informally, were in informal sectors, they were more affected. But for the other people, they've gone back to reorganizing how they work from home. Like where we are in Norway, we have almost now gotten used to working from home and trying to do as much as we can from where we are. So
yes. Somebody's going to ask you again what now the world economy is, right? Let's talk about the US, which has been one of the biggest contributors of the diaspora remittances into the country. When you look at it, they have a new president in Joe Biden. We're already looking at his policies. Would we say that, well, this could be another effect as well? We're seeing this drop in remittances into the country and looking at exactly what his economic recovery plan is in terms of the economic recovery package. You would like to think that it would improve remittances into the country, but it has not.
yeah, but I think it's too quick to expect that it improves immediately because his bill, Biden's bill, it could nudge the world into openness.
Yes.
At at this moment in history because of the migration policies that is because remittances, who remits? It's migrants, immigrants who are remitting. So the better the policies are made anywhere, and the better we can migrate, of course, legally, and also welcome guest workers. Then, of course, it's going to definitely have an effect on remittances because, now this whole year, I think migration has really been hampered by the pandemic, and countries which normally take guest workers. Of course, then in 2020, I'm sure there was a huge reduction. So having said that, I think, and we all know that remittances are vastly more important than foreign aid, if I would say, and if migration would stop, this would also kind of dry up. So I think there is hope
Yes.
in Biden, and let's just give him a bit more time to see that he implements. He's come into a time where already there is the pandemic, so there are things to fight. First of all, for every country, I think the priority right now is ensuring that their citizens are safe.
Pretty much at this point in our conversation, I would like to introduce Joash Onsando, who is a public policy analyst and political strategist. Joash, yes, even as we are talking about the remittances being on a low in 2020, they were actually well performing, overtaking what were originally our biggest contributors in terms of this remittances or the GDP, like tourism. Question is going to be now, we're starting to see that fall in 2021. Why would it be so when in fact you like to think that 2020 would have been the year when there was this big hit in this remittances?
First of all, let me begin by saying that even as the remittances are falling,
yes,
we are still doing way better than what the World Bank had projected, because the World Bank had projected 15-20% falls.
yes.
Secondly, I think the question you ask is, I think Rachel answered it earlier when she talked about, because we went immediately into economic hits in Kenya last year.
Yes.
And so people who have family abroad were calling and asking that their relatives, send money to cushion them against the effects of the pandemic.
Yes.
So that might explain that rise in 2020, when you'd expect that is when it would be hit.
Yes.
Now, in 2021, we're expecting the second, the third, and maybe fourth economic waves of the pandemic. So I think, in as much as we're looking at drops in remittances, I think we're doing better than what the World Bank had projected. But I think they'll still be constrained going forward for at least 2 to 3 years.
Yes. Josh, asked Rachel the same question that I want to put across to you this morning. I mean, one of the biggest contributors have been US, especially when we're talking about diaspora remittances into the country. Now, we do know what Joe Biden has called his third economic recovery package. Do you think that is going to have any effect on the remittances we're going to see back into the country?
I think I'd like to look at Joe Biden as more than the plan in terms of remittances.
Yes.
I think what a Biden presidency portends that a Trump presidency didn't is a bit of security for immigrants. So you have Kenyans who are in America are a bit more safe and secure in their ability to stay in the States for the long term.
Yes.
And that therefore doesn't put pressure on them to save, and some of that money that they're not saving, then they'll be able to send back home. So I'd like to look at it as more of an immigrant issue rather than an economic recovery plan issue.
All right, Rachel, let's get back on that conversation over diaspora remittances, especially the way in which now we do know it's one of the biggest contributors again to the country's GDP. If you look at exactly how what have been the older contributors like tourism, have they been affected really much by the coronavirus pandemic, and even agriculture as well. Do you feel that, well, indeed, when you're looking at these numbers and saying, well, they are the leaders now in terms of your contribution, that you need to treat them separately? And we had this conversation last year that indeed you need to even say, well, diaspora sector. Is that the conversation that the country should be having right now? And indeed, if they have that conversation, then what are we looking at that has not been done right now?
That was to me.
Yes, Rachel.
Okay, yeah, sure. I think the best thing is what hasn't been done is that I still feel like Kenya as a country, we have not yet recognized the power the diaspora has which can really help the country, especially at this time. They have not leveraged totally on diaspora remittances, because if they could take diaspora as more seriously and give them space also to be able to be on the table of discussing development matters at a deeper level, I believe diaspora would be able to also harness the power of remitting collectively, not only to the consumptive sector, but they would really come more with investment matters, or a lot of diasporans are waiting for something like diaspora funds to come. So that would be one of the things that I think would need to be done now. Yeah, yes. I hope that our country does not waste this crisis and that it involves the diaspora seriously in serious conversations.
Josh, when we have diaspora remittances actually overtaking what have been our biggest foreign exchange earners into the country, like tourism, when you look at the way in which then it's now poised, because we got into the pandemic, that's when we realized, wow, diaspora remittances can actually record also bigger numbers into the country, more than what we've been depending on. Is there something that needs to be done to foster the remittances that come into the country?
Yeah, I think one way to look at the pandemic is that it's an opportunity to rethink how we do things.
Yes.
And definitely in terms of diaspora remittances, that's an area that Kenya needs to keenly look at. As Rachel mentioned, a lot of that money comes into going to the consumptive sector. But I think there needs to be more processes, there needs to be more structures that allow diasporans to send back money home in a more structured way, targeted towards investment. And this would have to be both a private sector and a public sector issue. I know a lot of banks have got diaspora banking departments, but it needs to be bigger than that. It has to, all the way from the stock exchange to all other industries, they need to begin to look at attracting diaspora remittances, not just for consumption, but for investment as well.
Yes. All right, Rachel, let's clear this conversation. Let's start to clear this conversation like this. I mean, what is getting talked about right now is how the globe again is getting into the third wave of the coronavirus pandemic. What is your prediction? Is this going to also continue affecting the diaspora remittances into the country, just as Josh is predicting as well?
I'm an optimist. I think they will take a positive turn because judging from the how diasporans are talking, I think they are ready to get involved very seriously.
Yes.
Yeah, and there are a lot of good, what do I call them? Good schemes or products which the diaspora themselves have designed. They're not designed in Kenya for diaspora. They're designed by diaspora Kenyans for investing in Kenya. And I see people, there are a lot of Zoom meetings or what, and the reactions are really positive. It's like an idea whose time has come. So from my side, I think there will be a rise, or like Josh has said, there will be, people are looking at how things will be done a different way at this time. So I believe we are headed in the right direction. We just need now the policy makers and, like Josh said, the private sector and also the public sector to help support this so that it can flow seamlessly. Yeah, that the barriers can be removed.
Yes, pretty much. Josh, your prediction that we might actually continue to see them dip in the next 2 or 3 years, would it be tested against what other economies are predicting? US is predicting a rebound in the economy starting from this year after they started activating the economic recovery package. China is also predicting a rebound as well. I mean, if you look at most West economies, they're predicting a rebound in the economic status this year. Would it be tested by you saying, well, but in the next 2 to 3 years, they will be reducing, when in fact the sentiment is that these economies that have been the leaders in terms of contributing the diaspora remittances, they are on a rebound stage?
I think, I mean, I don't want to sound like a pessimist, but I think the rebound will take a while. To be honest, I think for us to go back to pre-COVID levels, we're talking about 2022 to 2024.
Yes.
More importantly, is you have to look at the nature of the Kenyan diaspora. The Kenyan diaspora is a very aggressive thinker, very, forward planner and so on and so forth. So even then you expect that some of them will be thinking about long-term, how to cushion themselves in the short term so that in the long term they're in a better position to remit. So there are two factors there. I mean, yes, we'll begin to see the economy is turning around, but the important thing is, when do we get to pre-COVID levels? Because once we get to pre-COVID levels, then we can expect things, including remittances, will revert to pre-COVID levels and will not be affected or be done as a reaction to the pandemic, but as a reaction to more long-term factors and influences.
Pretty much. All right. Let me thank you, Rachel Mwakazi, for joining us this morning, all the way from Norway. Thank you very much. We take a short break, but once we come back, we are still with Josh. We're going to look into other factors that you're waking up to this morning in terms of your economy. Good morning.